Hello and welcome to another lecture on an introduction to R. Today we're going to be talking about factors, which is how R categorizes categorical variables such as sodas or car manufacturers or something like that. The first thing that we're going to want to be able to do is to edit my factor labels. So maybe this goes from M's and F's to males and females, or maybe make things uppercase or lowercase or something like that. Basically, this is to pretty things up. Second, we're going to want to learn how to reorder factor levels. This is going to be very important because when we make graphs or make tables, the order that my categorical levels come in could be a very important thing. So we're going to look at how to manually sort them or maybe sort them according to some other variable. And then the final thing that we're going to want to do is to figure out how can I collapse factor levels into a single factor. So to begin with, let's consider creating a factor. In this case, I've got a vector of a couple of soft drinks, and if I store it as a character string, then everything's just stored as a character string. And if I were to have millions and millions of observations, I would have Diet Coke repeated over and over and over and over again. And this might actually be quite memory intensive. So instead, what R does when it creates a factor, we're going to have some levels, but notice over here, it's no longer storing the character string Diet Coke, Coke, Sprite, and Pepsi. Instead, it's actually storing the group identifier. So group 2 corresponds to Diet Coke. Group 1 corresponds to Coke, etc. So really, we could think of a factor as having some metadata that goes with it. In this particular case, we've got the levels and the label. So level 1 corresponds to Coke, level 2 Diet Coke, 3 Pepsi, 4 Sprite. Now this matters because this metadata table that we've just generated here actually is going to be the sort order that is going to happen whenever I make a graph or a table. Coke comes first, then Diet Coke, then Pepsi. I need to be able to change that, as well as I need to be able to make these labels a little bit more pretty because I think there should be a space between Diet and Coke. To manipulate factors, we're going to use a package called forcats, which is for categorical variables. And this is part of the tidyverse system of packages that we're going to use for the rest of the semester. The forcats package functions typically start with FCT, so that's factor, and then an underscore. So this is going to be factor reorder, factor infrequency, factor relevel, but typically these functions all begin with FCT. So to begin with, I've got a data set here that I'm going to just create, and I've got these students, and I've got year as being a factor with freshmen, juniors, seniors, etc. I've got gender as well, but it's coded with 2 levels, 0s and 1s. This turns out to be a very bad idea, and we want to clean up what those factor labels are. So to begin with, let's start with the males and females. So we're going to take my students' data set and we're going to use this factor recode. And what the factor recode is going to do is it's going to change the label. And what we're going to do is anywhere where I had a label of 1, I'm going to turn that into a male. So factor recode takes my factor and then changes the labeling scheme. 1s become males, and then females, the 0s are going to become females. And so now notice over in this environment, we now have my gender is a factor, still with 2 levels, females and males. Likewise, we might want to change my year in school to be a little bit more appropriate. Instead of freshman, I want to call that label first year. So we're going to recode that to be first years. And so now this is going to have first year, junior, etc. Now, unfortunately, the sort order for this is still a little obnoxious. As we make a little plot here, we've got males and females, but my year in school is first year, then junior, then senior, then sophomore. The sort order was alphabetical, not chronological, so we should change that. The way that we're going to do this is we're going to use this function called factor relevel. And this factor relevel is going to take my year factor, and I can give it a list of my factor levels as long as I want. Now the first one becomes the first level, then the second one is the second, and if you only specify 1 or 2, then everything else will be sorted the exact same way that it was. So what this code is going to do is it's going to move senior to be the very first option. And the first option is going to be down at the bottom here. So now seniors are my first group. This is going to be my reference group in any sort of modeling function. And then first years, juniors, and sophomores. And so what I'd like really to do is to do seniors, then juniors, then sophomores, then first year. So we're going to go ahead and run this chunk of code, which sets seniors first, then juniors, then sophomores, then first years. Now that might make sense when making a table, but make more visual sense to have first years down at the bottom, then sophomores, then juniors, and then seniors. So what I could do is I could take the data that I already have where the sort order is seniors first, and I could reverse it using this factor reverse command. And what that will do is just reverse the sort order for my year variable. So there are other ways to move factors around. I'm going to start with my seniors first. I'm going to reverse it so we go from freshmen or from first year, sophomores, juniors, seniors. Now I'm going to shift it 1, and what that shift is going to do is it's going to bring the first one, the first level, and move it to the back. So this shifts the first element to the rear. Now I could do a negative version of this. If I do a -1, what it'll do is it'll shift first year to be the second one, and it'll bring seniors to the bottom. So the shift is just really a rotation of factor orders. I can shift my order around so that it appears in terms of the frequency, which is going to say, sort this so that the largest class is on the bottom. And so my largest class in this case was my juniors, then my first years, seniors, and then sophomores. And then we get this nice little stair-stepped graph. Another example comes from a poll for the 2020 Democratic primaries. And in a poll back in September of 2019 had the following data, where we have a bunch of different candidates. We have their percent of support and their age on election day. Now, one of the things that I want to do is if I don't make any modification, I end up with a graph that's pretty ugly, where none of this ordering makes any sense because we've got Elizabeth Warren, we've got Joe Biden. You know, the sort order is by alphabetical. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to reorder these bars, but I want to reorder them by another element or another column in my data set. In this case, I want to reorder it by their percent of support. So we're going to use this command here, which is factor reorder, where I give the candidate is the factor that I want to reorder, and the column that I want to order them by is given by the percent column in my data set. And so now we end up with a nice graph. So I've got this undecided group, an other group, and a no one group. And honestly, we might want to move those around. First off, do the sort order based off of their percent of support, then tweak that sort order to move other down to the very beginning. In this case, the beginning is the bottom of the graph, and also move the undecided voters to the bottom of the graph as well. And so now our no one, other, and undecided set of voters, they're all at the bottom of the graph. Now, instead of moving them to the bottom of the graph, we might want to collapse the no one, other, and undecided into just a generic other category. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we'll do is we will take our data set, and I'm going to collapse my candidate, and I'm going to create a new category that is going to be called other, and that is going to take the categories no one, other with a capital O, and undecided, and collapse those into those three category levels into one. And now we've got other, other, other. But unfortunately, I still have 3 rows for other now. So what I'd like to do is to take those 3 other rows and basically sum them up so I just have one row. That's going to be a dplyr command where I summarize and I sum across those percentages. So I add up the 9, the 1, and the 3 to get 13%. So we're going to take my Democrats, I'm going to collapse no one, other, and undecided into an other group. I'm going to group by candidate and sum across the rows that I have per candidate. And that's only going to sum across other because all the other candidates only have a single row. Then I'm going to take my candidate column and I'm going to reorder it by their percentage. I'm going to move other all the way down to the bottom, and then I'm going to print out our table. And there we have a relatively decent looking graph that is appropriately sorted for the candidates, and then the other category is down at the bottom. All right, that is the basics of working with factors. The end result is that we want to be able to clean up the factor labels, we want to be able to change the sort order, and we want to be able to collapse or expand the list of available categorical levels. That's all that I have for you today. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.